What's up, everybody? Today I want to talk about Lunar Remastered Collection, which comes out in just a few days for all major consoles. I was fortunate enough to be given a review code by the publisher. You can read my full review over at Forbes. I'll put a link down in the description. I'm going to be using some footage from trailers, as you're seeing here, as well as some footage from my own playthrough that I did record on my PS5. I will only be showing footage from the first game. I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't played, but I do want to just show what the game's like, talk about it a little bit, and dig into why I consider this a must-play for anyone that's a fan of JRPGs. So if you're not aware, the Lunar series originally started back in the early 90s on the Sega CD. That's when the first Lunar game came out. It was called Lunar the Silver Star, and it has been remade and remastered many times for Sega Saturn, PlayStation, Game Boy Advance. Now again here, PSP as well got a remake. There was a spinoff over on the DS, and then the sequel, Eternal Blue, also got remade for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation, and those are the two games that we have collected in this remastered collection. They've taken the complete remakes for PS1, bundled them together and repackaged and remastered them together in this one collection, and it is a great collection at that. Now, there has not been a whole lot done to these games. There is new voiceover work for all of these spoken lines, remastered things like audio, expanded resolution to full widescreen, got some new visual effects here and there, some flourishes and things like that. But for the most part, these are the PS1 games from start to finish. Even the dialogue, as far as I've seen, is identical. So if you have the PS1 version still, this is basically the same thing. It's just more accessible and readily available now. Also in this remastered collection, they've included both the classic original versions of the games as well as the new remastered version, so you can pick which one you play, which is nice. I always love whenever developers do that. Instead of just pushing the remastered version onto you, you have a choice with this collection, which is great. And that's really about all they've really changed. There's not a whole lot different here, but it's not a bad thing because this was already based off of the previous remake, so they've just polished up and shined it a little bit, which is great. I think that's all they really needed to do. So the Lunar games are well known for pioneering a lot of elements of CD-ROM gaming in RPGs. So the Sega CD was an early 90s peripheral for the Sega Genesis, and this was one of the first games that really used the benefits of a CD-ROM when it came to games. You had a great, amazing soundtrack. There was actual voiced dialogue. They had full motion animated video, anime style cutscenes. They were large games that really kind of pushed the narrative that you could tell in a video game forward in a lot of ways, because back then, keep in mind, early 90s, a lot of these JRPGs were very simple in terms of their storylines. It was very straightforward. There wasn't a whole lot of character development in many of those games. Cutscenes basically weren't even a thing. It was usually just text boxes. So Lunar was really groundbreaking in a lot of ways because it was almost like you were playing through an anime movie as it was happening. You got to see cutscenes that were full anime style. There's over an hour in each game of anime, fully animated cutscenes, and they've been upscaled and remastered, so they look gorgeous. Even though those cutscenes are still 4:3 aspect ratio, they're not 16:9 widescreen, so you do get letterboxes on the left and right whenever the cutscenes are playing. They look incredible. They just look so good. All the music's amazing, all the sound's amazing, all the good stuff, fantastic, excellent, well done. So the caveat that I have with this collection is that if you are not too much of a fan of a lot of the tropes and roadblocks and obstacles that you see in JRPGs, particularly ones from the 90s, this is not really going to change your mind very much. This is very much a product of its time, this game. What I mean by that is combat's, relatively straightforward and simple. This is not going to be an in-depth strategic affair like Octopath Traveler 2. This is not an action-based combat system like Star Ocean, the Second Story R. This does not have, a lot of complexities with the way that combat works, or with, like the way the world exploration works. It's a relatively linear game. Combat is pretty traditional turn-based combat. However, all those things being said, the story, the characters, the music, the presentation, all of those things are top notch. So I think that if you love and have an appreciation for that simple kind of turn-based gameplay, if that feels like comfort food to you, which it does to me, then there's a lot that will appeal to you here in the Lunar Collection, especially if you haven't played these games before. I think the charm and the character development and the presentation, it evokes an aesthetic that is not very common, especially even nowadays. So I think it really captures a lot of your imagination in that way, and that's what makes these games really particularly special and makes them stand the test of time and worth revisiting and playing for the first time even now. So one of the other caveats that I will mention is that when it comes to a progression through the game, it's, like I said, pretty linear. There's not a whole lot of grinding that you have to do. However, there will be moments where you are probably going to end up spending some time grinding, just because it is a JRPG. I mean, there's not really any way around that. You will reach some bosses that are difficult, and you'll find yourself needing to level up. So there are moments of that here and there, but they're not very common. It's not a very difficult JRPG. You're not going to find yourself getting stuck, I would say, very often. I think it took me maybe 6 or 7 hours before I ever really needed to go grind a few levels to get past the boss in the first game when I was playing this. And the differences between the games, there are some differences, right? Because they are connected. The second game, Eternal Blue, takes place 1,000 years after the first game. So I do recommend playing them in order. Obviously, don't start with Eternal Blue. You should play Silver Star first. There are some connections. They share some commonalities between them. So there will be callbacks and references and things that you'll recognize when you play them in the correct order. And the second game does pick up a little bit faster. The first game is, not so much baby's first RPG, but it is kind of, it was designed to be sort of this, resetting of expectations for what a JRPG was for people. So you're going to notice that there are a lot of tropes. And the reason for that is because this game was part of that brigade of games that pioneered a lot of these tropes. So it might seem derivative compared to, its contemporaries nowadays, but you have to remember this game originally came out in 1992. I mean, that is 33 years ago. There weren't games like this very much back when this first came out. And so it is a remaster of a remake, but the source material is still, dated. So, you have to keep that in mind when you play this game. I think that's important context to have. But if you can get past that, if you can get over some of those, age trappings, the things that are, unavoidable baggage that Lunar has as a franchise, you're going to find something here that is extremely charming, extremely fun, just really evokes that sense of adventure and discovery and heroism that a lot of classical, stories and animes and fantasy things were all about back then. So that's really where the special sauce is with Lunar. So I think the second game does make it a little bit more mature. Things kick off a little bit faster. Characters feel and act older. The writing is, a little more pointed. I think the storyline, the narrative goes in slightly darker directions here and there. It doesn't feel like a, child thrust into the, throes of adventure to become a hero like the first game so much. It's more of a, epic tale of legends and gods and goddesses, and the second game really kind of ups the ante in a lot of ways, which is to be expected for things like this. So, all that being said, if you are a fan of RPGs, if you're a fan of JRPGs, if you have connections and history playing games like this growing up on the Genesis, on Super Nintendo, on PS1, these are games that are important pieces of game history first and foremost, but also just excellent JRPGs that really are super fun to play. So if you want to read more detailed thoughts about what I think of these games, if you want to read my full review, you can find that at the link in the description over on Forbes, where I am a gaming contributor focused on retro gaming and MMOs. If you enjoy retro gaming content, if you want to see more reviews and things like that of older games, you can obviously subscribe here on my YouTube channel and keep up with me at all my other links down in the description. So thank you very much for hanging out, watching. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay, and I hope you enjoy the game if you decide to give it a chance.